So welcome back, everybody. We
Oh,
hope
wait, I could have said anything I wanted.
you could have, not anymore. We're back on.
Don't tell Richard that. That's dangerous.
All right, so you're all coming back into this space where you just did this growth versus fixed mindset continuum activity. And I'd like to go group by group and give about 30 to 45 seconds for each group to talk about you can talk about anything that was discussed. And then I also gave some prompts just in case you want to talk about something in particular. So first we're going to go to breakout group 1. And so can our recorder for breakout room 1 share some things about that breakout room? I think that's Brian, Jeff, Tina, and Anisha.
Yes, this is Brian. I was assigned the recorder role for room 1. So when we did our exercise, we managed to get through 3 continua. And for the most part, there was a little bit of outlier, but it seemed like people clustered sort of near the middle of the continuum. So I think that people agreed that in general, there were things that you could change about your abilities, no matter what the ability is. It was brought up by one person that maybe some people have an innate range and they may be able to push themselves to the cutting edge of that range with lots of training, but there might be some things that are beyond their reach in some capabilities.
Brian, thank you so much for that share. And that's the point of this activity, is that how we all think about this is going to be a little different. And then in some instances, we might find ourselves falling more in the middle of the continuum or thinking similarly to some of our colleagues. We're going to move to group 2 right now. And one question was, can I pull up what you did? And I certainly can. So I think I've got group 2 up now. And then if someone from group 2 wants to go ahead and share, and feel free to direct me, whoever the recorder was, if you want me to go to a particular slide.
All right, so I was, this is David talking. I was the reporter for this group. So yeah, we'll start with that first one, creativity. We had a discussion about those that were naturally creative tended to put this high, whereas people that felt themselves not very creative said they didn't think it was that malleable. But yeah, everyone seemed to agree that that you can improve your creativity if you worked at it. Certainly one thing that came out, having parents that encouraged you when you were very young seemed to be very, very helpful in that process in growing in that mindset. Let's go to the second slide there. So this one dealt with ability to pay attention. The 3 that clustered in the middle there, we had a really interesting discussion about having ADHD and how that actually like physically prevents people from being able to pay attention. And then also an outlier there in the group that talked about the process of learning to pay attention to things as you go through your academic career and having to be forced to focus on things for a very, very long period of time, and then seeing the growth in students' abilities to be able to do that. So it was a fun, interesting talk. Let's do our last slide there, which was, I'm sorry, it was the 3rd slide, the extroversion slide. Yeah, right. Thank you. So, so we were talking about extroverted versus introverted. We had 3 introverts and 1 extrovert in our group. And the introverts seemed to say, yes, this is something that I can turn on if I'm given a time limit. Like, how long do I actually have to be extroverted? I can do it for this period of time, but it would never be my choice to pick to be extroverted. But the extrovert said she's actually been able to train some people to improve in their extroverted capabilities over their lifetime. So definitely hope for those of us introverts.
That's great. Thank you so much, David, for sharing that out. And I think it goes back to Irene's point when she asked this question in the beginning. How do you tell the difference between, something that's a characteristic of who you are versus when you're actually having a fixed mindset perspective about something? And so I think some of what David said really helps give an answer to Irene's question. All right, let's toggle over now to breakout room 3. And who's going to speak for us there?
Apparently it's me, even though when you were in there, it wasn't me. But that's okay. We did a few, our group was actually heavily math people. So we had one person who was outnumbered in this. So the first one we picked was the artistic ability. And as you can tell, the one person who wasn't a math related person was all the way, that it can be improved. Where the other three was the math people who said, no, it's not as malleable or it can't be improved. So we had some different discussions about that and how we think that's different. Let's go to slide 3. I think that's the next one that I wanted to. Yes. So on this one, since we are all math people, luckily everybody agreed completely that math can be improved. And then on the next slide, this one was a little different because the ability to pay attention, we had a lot of conversation about how it's kind of hard to determine whether this can be improved or not. Dealing with special needs kids, a lot of us have children, or I taught in high school, so now teaching in college too, that have IEPs or special accommodations where they can't actually improve their listening skills, but we have to figure out a way. So some of us would agree that it can be improved, and some of us, as you can see in the picture, shows that it can't be. There was another one, and I think, can you go to the second, maybe? Nope. I know, it'd be so much better. That one, yes, creativity. So this was the interesting one to me. I will admit I'm the blue person. I'm all the way down there at the very end because I have no creative ability whatsoever. This is why I did not turn into a elementary teacher, because I can't make bulletin boards to save my life. So I don't think creativity is one of those things that can be improved on. But after talking with other people in my group, they agreed that some of them were like, it can be. It's just, depending on what you did. But one particular person in a group decided that creativity can definitely be improved on. It just depends on what you think creativity is. For me, the creativity was the boards and the pictures and, making it look all fancy. His was all about proofs in math. That's definitely creative, but some of us can't deal with it. So that's definitely something. But that was our group. We had a great time, even though I got shanghaied into doing this one.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for agreeing to be the recorder reporter for group 3, even though you might not have started there. And let me move on to group 4. Who would like to talk about group 4's work? Who's our recorder reporter?
Hello, that's me, Manisha. Right. Let's go to the first slide. We were missing some people. Larry and Larisha were missing, and Tina joined a little bit later. But so here is our artistic ability. Maria's head came off, unfortunately. You see that one of the...
Someone wrote that. I think I must have not grouped that one meeple, so I apologize.
Okay. But yeah, so here we ran the whole spectrum from very malleable to cannot be improved much. And I think we thought of this as like actual artwork, drawing and so on. Okay, next please. Extroversion, also we had a little debate about this because some of us are introverted and we wanted to be like, we are more in the middle or cannot be improved. But then we were thinking, does that mean that you can become more extroverted? So one of us who was more extroverted, I think, was all the way to the right. Next, please. Intelligence. We stuck in the middle. So some things can be improved, some cannot be. Next. Athleticism, we all thought we could be improved. We were all math or science people. Next. Ability to pay attention. So more, I think 2 of us are to the right, can be improved. I was more in the middle because I keep thinking at some, on one-on-one, I can pay very good attention and I'm totally focused. But when there are multiple things going on or there's multitasking to be done, I find my focus is all gone. So I think that's why there was that little bit of uncertainty. Next one. Math ability, we were pretty much in the center. Some things can be improved and some cannot be. So we kind of stuck in the middle. And there might be one more, creativity. So creativity, we were more on the right side. It can be improved, and we felt good about that.
Thank you so much for sharing out for your group. I really appreciate that. Let's move on. Let's check out what breakout room 5 did and who is our recorder reporter for that group.
Denise, here I am. I'm the reporter, even though I hate reporting. So the first one we have here is the artistic ability, and we had this discussion about innate versus skill, and we kind of grouped them a little bit in that, so that for artistic ability, we were saying that's a skill, so it could be improved. But some people have better artistic ability naturally. I guess that kind of go hand in hand with creativity sometimes. So that's what we thought with that one. For the next one, which is creativity, we were kind of stuck in the middle with that one because we felt that was more of like an innate characteristic, but then we had this interesting discussion on what exactly is creativity. So this discussion of creating something from scratch versus creating something from looking at options. Like, I don't think I'm a very creative person, but people have told me I'm creative because I make really great interactive activities, but I always have to look at other people's interactive activities and apply it to what I'm teaching. And they're like, you're very creative. I'm like, well, I'm not very good at like making something pretty, but it's your definition of creativity. Okay, so for the next one is extroversion. So we were actually a little on the side of it not being very malleable. I think most of us were introverts, and pretty much what we said with this is most of the time we can get through it, but not necessarily enjoy it, like what I'm not enjoying right now. So it's with reporting. Although most people say I'm very extroverted, I am very, very much an introvert. And we had some true introverts in our group, but the more you do it, the more comfortable I guess you can get with it. We only did 2 more. This athleticism, just real quick, we thought that, again, that was a skill that can be improved. I'm not very athletic, so I'm the purple one in the middle. That's just me. My mom tried to push me to do a lot of softball and stuff, but I was never very good at it. So the last one was intelligence. This was an interesting conversation. Most of us thought that it could be improved, almost thinking that that's what growth and fixed mindset's all about. And our outlier talked about kind of when people are in this mindset, the fixed mindset, that it can't be improved. It's very difficult to improve it. So it was kind of interesting when this person was speaking. We're like, fixed mindset, that's a fixed mindset. So that it was quite interesting. Thank you.
Denise, thank you so much for sharing and for being willing to be the recorder reporter role and to step out of your comfort zone and be a little uncomfortable. I appreciate that. And let's move on and hear from breakout room 6. So who is our recorder reporter for breakout room 6?
Hi, this is Berlene. So for our group, we were able to complete 3 slides. So the first one was extroversion. So as you can see from the slider, we all thought pretty differently in terms of the malleability of extroversion. Some thought that it wasn't very malleable. Some thought that with practice we could adapt and adjust to our particular settings. You can go to slide number 3. And then we also did intelligence as well. So as educators, we were thinking that intelligence was extremely malleable, and it was something that could be grown over time in our students once they learn the right skills and strategies learn how to apply the principles as they continue to progress throughout their education. And then slide 4. And then in terms of creativity, some of us thought that creativity wasn't very malleable at all. Others thought that there was potential there. So we know that, for example, you can take courses in creativity. So it's the same idea as intelligence. Sometimes we may not have the best start in life, but with the right training and the right mentoring, we can start to build these skills in creativity over time. Okay, so that's all I have for group number 6.
Verlene, thank you so much for sharing that. And let's move on to breakout room 7. Who wants to talk about, well, who wants to? Who is the reporter who's going to talk about what you all found out from this exploration?
I will go ahead since we didn't have a reporter. So if you move to, I guess we'll start with athleticism. So most of us felt, or that we only had 3 individuals, but you know, for the majority of us felt that it was not very malleable. And my reasoning was that there are some genetics that provide limitation to some individuals. And of course, not everybody can make it to the Olympics, right? And so that's the way we felt about that in general. There was one that was kind of in between. So this individual felt that it could be a little bit more, you know, improved. So that's that. We only got through 2 of them. So the next one, creativity. The majority of us were on the side of can be improved. I myself was a little less so. I was the green one here. I feel like that I'm not very creative. So, but I feel like I could be as long as I'm trained well to be able to, I feel like you need to be able to see things before you make them to have an idea of what you want to do. So I think you kind of got to train yourself to do that. Most may not agree with that, which is totally fine. And it's mainly just due to my lack of creativity. I have to say that I am an introvert myself, and there was so much talk about that, and I was extremely introverted, and I had a hard time getting in front of any class, never mind teaching, but over the years it's gotten a lot easier.
Lynn, thank you so much for sharing what your group did and also sort of how you're thinking about this as an educator. And I hear you on the public speaking one. I was a swim coach a long time ago, and I'll never forget the first time I had to speak in front of more than a few hundred people. And all I could think was, oh, my hand is shaking, but no one can see it because I have this podium to hide behind. And I was like, let that go, I'll be okay. And it went great. But it's just so funny that even as teachers and as presenters and as lecturers, we still have these moments where being in that public speaking role brings out a lot of emotions, and it's definitely taking a risk for a lot of us. So thank you for sharing. We've got, I think, 2 more rooms, and next up we have breakout room 8. And so who's our reporter from breakout room 8?
It's me. Hey everyone, my name is Tonika Jones and I am reporting from group 8. So first, we ended up looking at athleticism. For the most part, all of us kind of believe that athleticism is something that can be improved upon. So we all had a growth mindset in relation to athletic abilities being developed. However, we kind of thought about it from different perspectives. Like I myself was kind of thinking of it as like, I guess some of the things that would entail, well, I guess kind of involve some physical limitations. I thought about dunking, like being able to dunk a ball. And I was like, well, me compared to LeBron James, like I can train, but I'll never be like to that level because of certain physical limitations like height and just being able to develop some of those other skills. So for the most part, we were more towards like it being very malleable, but you know, I was kind of a little bit over to the other end. So next slide. intelligence. So all of us pretty much had a hands down group consensus that intelligence could be improved upon. Even if you do have certain limitations or disabilities, it's more so about finding the best ways for you to learn in order to hone your strengths and just further develop your abilities. And then extroversion. For the most part, we all kind of agreed with that as well as being something that's pretty malleable. I just kind of personally believe that regardless of if somebody is an introvert or an extrovert, they can kind of, I guess, train themselves to deal with being in either realm. So like myself, for example, like I would say that I'm an extrovert, but like public speaking makes me nervous. Like even when Diana was talking about like getting nervous, like literally as she was talking about it, like I was getting nervous, like I was experiencing those handshakes and like those butterflies, even in a virtual environment. But yet again, you just deal with it. And the more and more you throw yourself into being uncomfortable, you kind of develop different ways and strategies to cope. So, yeah.
Tanika, thank you so much for sharing. And I loved what you shared out about LeBron, because often when we do this activity, people do a comparison of Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky. And the reason they bring that up is Michael Phelps is you know, an amazing US swimmer, decorated Olympian, but he naturally is built to be a swimmer. And then Katie Ledecky, also decorated, also an amazing Olympian, world record holder. They both are in so many events, and Katie Ledecky is not built to be a swimmer. But when you hear about the effort and dedication she had to the sport, you can see why she's successful in the races where she's successful. So it's a great reminder that sometimes we have these resources that we can draw on, like our height in basketball, that, you know, people around us might not have those same resources. And so that's something to think about with that improvement. What resources do I have that will support me in improving? All right. So that was great. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the group members, she made a very interesting point about, well, she thought about it from the mindset of, well, I guess the approach of thinking about it as like training for marathons. And that is something that can be improved upon regardless of like, you know, height, weight, or other things.
Yes, that's a great point. So thank you so much for sharing out for your group. You are a wonderful presenter in a virtual setting. And I think we have one more group. There was no breakout group 10, so we're on breakout room 9, and I'd love to hear from that reporter.
Yes, how are you? It's so wonderful to be able to go last. So what all you guys said was great. We only got through a couple. We had a little bit of technical difficulty. So with regard to, did we do that? Is that athletic? Is this our slide? I'm sorry, Diana, is this group 9?
It is group 9.
Artistic ability? Okay, I don't remember doing that as well as I remember doing the second one, but anyway.
You want me to go to creativity?
Yeah, creativity would be good because one of our members, Lusuda, brought up, you know, that we can be inspired by our environment, that we may not consider ourselves creative, but we can place ourselves in space to be inspired. And maybe that motivates us to want to be more creative. And I guess as long as motivation is there, you know, there is that opportunity. One of our team members, Bill, mentioned that he believes that it can be, well, you can see I'm the black icon there. I was a little bit further away from everyone, but for those that believed that creativity was more malleable, mentioned that there's nothing inherent in our environment that prevents us from achieving it. So as long as we have access to inspiration and maybe some other resources, that it was possible. That's as far as we got, guys.
That's okay. Every group works a little bit differently. And I really like how you connected motivation with improvement. I think that's definitely something I think about as an instructor. And let me toggle back over. So thank you everybody for being so willing to share during this activity. And I'm glad so many of you seem to appreciate it. in terms of our technical team, we thought about, do we do this as a Google poll, as a Zoom poll? Do we use Google Slides? And so if you want to know more about how to use Google Slides or to do this activity, there is the resource. If you look at the bottom of this PowerPoint, and we will post the PowerPoint to the Google Classroom, you'll see that I took this activity from mindsetkit.org. Of course, they give facilitation notes. I've read those facilitation notes. I purposely picked ones that tend to evoke a lot of controversy. So I was hoping for that when we worked on this. And then the other thing I'll say is we also had to think about a creative way to do this online. Oftentimes this is done in a classroom and you basically put a piece of tape along the floor and have people stand along the continuum. And so that works well when you have 39 participants, but when you are in an online session, we can't do that. And so I hope some of you are able to think about how to use these continuum activities in your own classroom. And I'm happy to share, you have copies of my Google Slides, and I'm happy to share with you how I made them as well. So thank you everybody for being so enthusiastic in terms of your participation, your willingness to take a risk, and your willingness to take on a role to make the whole discussion be successful. So I really appreciate that. All right, we have 18 minutes and I am to the final part of the presentation. And so where we are now is that I want to talk a little bit about how this connects to my research and my background in naming student strengths. And I also want to introduce all of you to a sentence frame that I've used with my students and my prospective teachers to help think about how we're naming and noticing our students' strengths. I will, for the interest in time, do a little bit to cut down on this activity. And so please feel free to reach out to me if you have additional questions. But why this is important, a little background. It broadens our conceptions of what counts as smart or as a strength in STEM classrooms. It helps us be able to notice and name students' strengths even when the work is partially incorrect or incomplete. So when you look at research on noticing and naming students' strengths, so often teachers will say, oh, I can name so many strengths for my one student, but I struggle to name strengths for some of these other students. And so thinking about, you know, what do we do when the work is partially incorrect or incomplete, I think is much harder and much more important than thinking about, okay, what does this look like when it's a student that I can readily see their strengths in my classroom. And then lastly, I want to talk some about how practicing and learning how to use noticing and naming students' strengths to promote a growth mindset perspective is really important. When you do this practice and when you think about how to say it to your students, you're promoting a growth mindset. And so thinking about the language you use and how you say it and how you frame that participation or the student's contribution is what's key. Now, we're going to save this Zoom poll for just a second, so hold on that. And what I want to do is I'm going to share an abbreviated version of this, but one point of my research is that we look at this teacher noticing literature. And teacher noticing literature, one of the big tenets is that the more experience you have, the more you're typically better at noticing things in the classroom, understanding what it's a case of, and being able to know how to make a decision and react. And so one thing I wanted to bring up with this is that we all come in with different noticing experiences. So I'm only going to show part of this video, but take a moment and think about what is important here. Can I understand what is happening here? And what is this a case of? I will say the video I chose for today's session is one that does have some teaching commentary, so that just keep that in mind as we move through the video. It's not just classroom.
Grade math, and this is my warm-up routine that I do with my students almost every day. I call it my favorite no. Okay. Good morning, you guys. Your warm-up is on the board. I'm going to hand out your index cards. I put a warm-up problem on the board, hand out index cards to all the kids, have them write their answer. I collect it, and then I sort it, and I say yes, no, yes, no. And I look for my favorite wrong answer or my favorite no, and we analyze that. 4 minutes to work on it. Everyone makes mistakes. We're gonna see your mistakes, you're gonna see my mistakes. But A mistake is your opportunity to share with me how much you understand. And if I don't know that you don't know something, I need to teach you before the test. The test is too late. And this is a great spot for me to teach you. Make sure your name is on your card. Put your pencil in your pencil slot and pass your cards to the center. I started my warm-up routine to replace clickers that a lot of classes are buying. So that was a clicker for each student. You ask a question, they log in an answer. And then you look at your computer screen and you know what percentage of your students understand the problem. Well, we didn't have money for that, so instead, I thought, well, what if I gave everyone index cards, collected them real quick with their answers already written on it, and then I can just sort them as quick as possible and find out what percentage of my kids know the answer. No, yes, costs 40 cents instead of $15,000. Yes, so we have quite a few yeses and some very interesting no's. 1, 2, 3. I then took that a step further, something I couldn't do with clickers. 7. Look at the ones who are getting it wrong. How far are they from getting it right? And showing that work to the other kids. Okay, my favorite no. Someone wrote this. I say it's my favorite no because I want the kids to first of all recognize what they're about to see is wrong. And I want them to recognize that there's something good in the problem. Like there's mistake, but it's my favorite no because it showed some good math. So that's the wrong answer, but they did some things that I love. What in that problem am I happy to see? We always talk about what's right first, so that if it's any student's work, they are like, oh, I did do that right. There's mistake, but the mistake didn't ruin the whole thing. What do I like about this problem? Gavin.
Well, they distributed both with the 4x and the -2.
Very nice. And what? Today's lesson was on factoring. So I needed to make sure they understood how to distribute. They distributed. And what lets you know that they distributed? David?
How there are no more parentheses.
There are no more parentheses. And they didn't just drop the parentheses. So they're asked to distribute a term with a variable.
All right, so I'm going to stop the video right there because I do want to get to some other parts of our presentation and the final activity for you all. So let me scroll back over. And so my favorite no is a common activity in K-12 math classrooms, but I just want to emphasize I also use this in higher education. So I do think there's a place for it. Some things, normally we would have a few minutes to discuss in small groups, but the reason I wanted you to discuss is so that you would see that you all were probably observing or noticing or focusing on different aspects of the classroom. That typically happens when you do video club with other teachers, other instructors. Something else you should take away from this is you can attend to different aspects of teaching, learning, and the classroom environment. And so in our third session for the professional development, we'll look at some observation tools that you can use to address just student participation. Who's asking a question? Who's making a comment? It lets you focus your noticing on something specific. And then lastly, I just want to point out that oftentimes when we're in the moment, when we're teaching, we have this moment, and with video, you reduce some of the complexity because you all of a sudden aren't playing that teacher role and you get to play just the observer role, and you don't have to notice and then respond in the moment. Okay, so that's some things I think you all would have noticed once you saw this video and had some time to reflect on it. Now, what I want you to look at now is a student was asked to create a multiplication problem using the numbers 3 and 5. What do you notice about this student's work? So I'll give you a chance to look at the problem. And as you can guess, this is an elementary school student, and I know we're in higher education, but I do think it's important to look at this. now that you've had a chance to look at that student's work, you're going to get a Zoom poll, and it actually has 2 questions. It has our earlier question, which is just for me to get an idea of what kind of observation you've done before, what kind of work you've done in terms of noticing and doing classroom observations. And then the second part is to ask you, what do you notice about this student's work? Okay, and I'll go back to that slide so you'll be able to see that while we do this poll. And make sure you're able to see the poll on your screen. It's now been launched, so you'll see those 2 questions. So what are your prior experiences observing teaching, watching videos of teaching? And then what do you notice about this particular student's work? And we'll give everybody about 30 more seconds. I see we have 14 responses now. All right, 10 seconds remain. All right. So I should be sharing poll results now. And so the first piece was just for me to collect sort of what your prior experiences are so I can plan sessions, so I can do some planning around sessions 2 and 3. The second part, what do you notice about the student's work? So normally I give this in a presentation in a face-to-face presentation. And so doing it as a Zoom poll is a little different than having participants yell out answers. But if you look at the 2 answers that are 74%, one of them is the student created a division problem instead of a multiplication problem. And that's almost always, I've done this multiple times now. That's the first thing people point out. And so what I wanted you to realize is that we as STEM educators, and some of us are in student affairs and some other departments as well, we're so often trained to pick up students' mistakes first. Okay, so often we hone in on them right away and we don't step back to look at the strengths in their work. And so if you look at the last 2 responses, they're more thinking about, well, maybe the student did this because they're thinking about the relationship between multiplication and division. Another reason the student might have submitted this work is they're thinking that sharing can be used to model both multiplication and division problems. And so the idea is when you look at a student's work, what is the first thing you see? Do you look for where the strengths are in their contributions, or where are their deficits in their contributions? And so the point of this activity was to help you start thinking about, what do I do first when I notice a student's work? Now, let's see, let me just move that out of the way. As you all know, I have a Zoom rule that we start and end on time. And so what I'm going to do is share out our last activity, and then we'll actually complete it next class. You can tell I've been teaching a lot. Next session. And so what we would normally do is that we would look at the task through a student lens, and that would let us check out this student, try it out ourselves before we look at student work. And so you can check out the tasks for next time, but there are 4 tasks based on engineering. There's one that's science, it's pretty much biology. There's a math task, and then there's a student affairs task, which is looking at student resumes. And so normally I would have you work through the task yourself so that you can kind of think through it like a student would think through it. Next, I was going to give you a little background on where this work comes from. And also I'm going to save that now for next time. So the reason I'm interested in noticing and naming students' strengths is it helps get at this practice of assigning competence. And I'll share out some resources on assigning competence, but it's the idea that an instructor can name a student's strength and have it be specific and intellectual, and it's public. Because the idea here is you want to raise up a low status student, all right? And lastly, you want to make sure it's connected to the student's contribution and it's connected to the group progress. So early on in this professional development, someone asked about what do I mean when I say giving feedback is hard? And one of the reasons giving feedback or praise is hard is because we often don't make it specific, or we don't make it intellectual for those students where we are trying to share. I'm sorry, I realized I wasn't. Sorry, I had a moment. It says I'm not sharing and now I am. Sorry, I apologize. And so we want to make sure when we think about giving feedback, did I make it specific? Did I make it public? Is it connected to doing the work? Okay, because otherwise it might come across as empty praise, or the student might think, oh, she only thinks I have good handwriting. All right, and so there could be problems with feedback that isn't connected to the content, whether it's math, science, writing a resume, whatever this content is. Finally, the second question someone asked in the beginning of our session is, what does this mean as instructors? Do we need to be cognizant of our own mindset? Yes, we are always modeling for our students. And so when we model how to assign competence, we're showing our students what good participation looks like and what we expect of them. So we're setting those expectations. All right, I'm down to 2 minutes. So what we'll do at the beginning of next session, there is a woman in secondary math education named Lisa Jilk. She's an educator. She ended up going back from teaching to get her doctorate, and so she could look more at this work. But she came up with this sentence frame to use when we're looking at video of classrooms or when we're looking at student work samples. And I'll talk more about how to use this sentence frame, and you'll get to practice using this sentence frame with our student work samples at the beginning of next session. This is a great sentence frame. You can use it with colleagues when you're looking at student work samples, but it also adapts well into your classroom. And remember to make it about the student's contribution and not the student themselves. Lastly, it is 3:29. So what that means is I have to skip these last few slides and our final activity. And I am going to say that for the pre-session activities, we'll post more about them. But good news is you get to make one more Flipgrid and then you'll have one reading. So look forward to getting those. Session 2, we're going to get into more strategies, starting with the sentence frame and moving from there. And lastly, all right, I think I left the slide off, but if you can go into the Google Classroom and do the exit ticket in this final minute, it's a 3, 2, 1 exit ticket. So let me scroll actually over there. And so this is what it looks like. And we're just asking you, what are 3 things I learned? What are 2 things I want to learn? And what is 1 question I still have? So please answer that. And I thank you all for participating in today's session. It is 3:30, so after you answer that, I understand that most of you probably do have other responsibilities, but we'll send an email from the team about how to access these resources and some other information about our upcoming sessions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. So we're gonna go ahead and just leave everything in the Google Classroom. We're not going to toggle over into Blackboard just to limit confusion. And you guys can do your tickets. I'm just talking while you're doing it. But you are dismissed because it is 3:30 if you have to sign off. But I just want to let everybody know that we will remain in the Google Classroom and that Diana actually already has some of the activities, the pre-session activities already in the Google Classroom, and she'll add these additional components. I also want to just mention real quick, just for clarity purposes, that the video that Diana was showing is it just an example of how there's so much going on in the classroom. We're not endorsing any of the pedagogy that was presented in the classroom. The next session, Diana is going to help us identify strategies help us with strategies on how to identify things that's going on in the classroom and to ensure that we're not using deficit approaches when we provide feedback with our students. And so I just wanted to provide some clarity there. It's just an observation activity that she's presenting us with. So if I'll be on the Zoom call for a while, but if anybody has any questions, I think Diana is going to hang around too. But if you have to go, you are more than welcome to go. We're done. But thank you so much for attending and participating today. This was such a wonderful turnout, and I'm so appreciative for each and every one of you. And we look forward to reading your feedback and your exit ticket.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. And I'll hang out and I'm going to respond to a few questions people had in the chat as well.
Maria, I will get Ada to reach out to you real quick. I think she helped someone else earlier via telephone. So Ada can, she'll reach out to you.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for sharing what you just shared about the videos. Videos are they're such powerful tools for learning. So the preface, I think maybe to preface that what was shown in the video wasn't being endorsed may have helped a little bit versus just showing it, because if you're showing it, to me, that's something that I possibly could use if I don't know any better.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll say this, I use my favorite no in my classroom. I use it in my developmental math classes, and I use it with my prospective teachers as well. But I also think that you have to think about when you do an activity such as that, am I doing it in a way that creates space for everyone to participate? And am I doing it in a way that lets me highlight students' strengths and how students can learn from their mistakes, and how students can share out what they notice about these cards? So I think that Janae's point is really to think about this video. Any type of teaching activity, if it's not done properly in terms of thinking about who's our context, who is our audience, and how am I going to facilitate the activity so that it supports students' participation, it can easily transfer a good activity into something that doesn't work in your classroom space. And so I think that's something to think about, is that whenever you take someone else's activity, how do you make it your own? How do you make it work for your students? Are there parts of the activity you should change because you want it to be framed a certain way, or you want students' responses to be framed a certain way? And so that's something I think is important to understand about the video I showed.
I hear your response. That's, for me personally, as a person who has been a teacher of students, mostly students of color, they've already been messaged to pretty clearly that they aren't that good in math, and if they are in a developmental class and they are hearing, no, especially if they're struggling, that can set up a kind of mindset that is the antithesis to what you're trying to accomplish, I think. And there is some counter research and pedagogy from a mathematics educator who was also a mathematician, who put students who were in remedial classes, what they did was they started to teach those students higher level algebra, and those students then started to gain the confidence that they could do math. And then as a result, they were able to grasp the lower level math concepts. So it's real. I understand that what we're talking about really is a foundational philosophical difference in how we approach students. But I just think that it's something to be considered, especially when a lot, like in that video, most of those children, from what I could see visually, most of those children were not children of color. So I just think it's something to really talk about and unpack further as we, try to message to other educators exemplary best practices.
I think what you're saying is incredibly important, and I value your response. And I'll go back to context matters. Who your students are and how your classroom is set up and what you know about your students plays a large role in how you should design and implement an activity and how you frame it with language. And so you might not use that framing of my favorite no, and you might think of a different way to frame that activity because of what Angelique just shared. And I think that's something that we absolutely need to keep in mind. So thank you.
Anyone else? I don't want to end the meeting if anyone has any other questions. I know we didn't have a lot of time for discussion, so this is the time if you have anything to add or to ask Diana or myself. Okay, well, if all hearts and minds are clear, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. You have our contact information, and again, you are welcome to email or call us. Are we going to discuss sense of belonging in a later meeting? So yes, so again, these sessions build out on each other, and we'll probably, I think that was in the third session, the sense of belonging after the feedback, if I remember how we laid things out. But yes, so everything's going to build upon each other. And Vasudha, I do believe that is the third session, and Diana can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe it shows up in the third session.
Yes, yes.
And I'll just add for context, the goal of this training, and I want to reiterate it, I know it's on the website, but the goal is for you to take all of the strategies, customize them, and then have a set of strategies that you can apply in the fall. So that's why we wanted to hurry up and do this, not hurry up, but wanted to do this during the summer so that you can really apply this in the fall. And it worked out great that we're doing it virtually, and we have all of these virtual electronic resources, because most of our classes are going to be virtual in the fall. So we're hoping that you can apply not just the strategies, but the tools that we're using in your classroom. I find a lot of mindset stuff work one semester and it doesn't, right, it doesn't. And I think that's to Diana's point about customization. Yes, Vasudha, my school district here used Google Classroom for the entire COVID. So they just used Google Classroom and it worked great. Okay, well, Diana, if I have a thumbs up for you, I'm going to end the meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Oh, okay, bye-bye.